Hey guys, Chris Hughes coming back to you again, the Carolina Preps Facebook Live. Again, spending all week here at the North Carolina Coaches Convention in Greensboro. And if you don't know this guy, I'm sure he'll tell you who he is, but a dear friend of mine, Coach E.Z. Smith, a longtime coach at Concord. You've been in Florida. You've been with USA Football all over the country. Pleasure to have you sitting here talking football with me.
Thanks, Chris. It's always an honor to be with you. And let me go on record as saying I appreciate what Chris and Carolina Preps meant to football when you first got started and I was coaching, and then the extension to today's. I love to pull up y'all's website, see what's going on. Very informative, very neutral. You know, some sites are not neutral, and Chris, just being a former coach and being a great coach, we miss him in the profession, but he does the job that needs to be done out there. And thank you for the support of coaches and players.
Thank you for those kind words. And you're right. I've always kind of approached what I do with the website and how I do it more from a coach's aspect. You know, how can I become, because I've seen all the websites and I know how they all operate, and I say to myself, how can I be an asset to these guys versus, you know, a detractor and being a pain in their rear ends, because there's guys that are, and I try to be the latter. But what are you doing these days? I know you've been doing a lot of traveling, you do a lot of speaking, a lot of coaching coaches with your Heads Up program and the different stuff. How's life been going?
Well, life was really good. When I got out of coaching in 2009, I was wondering, you know, what was going to be going on. I looked into UNC Charlotte and some smaller colleges, especially with the retirement system. You know, I could only make X amount of dollars in the state system without affecting my retirement. So I was looking more at private sectors. And then USA Football came along. Peter Vacco of the Carolina Panthers, I had done some clinics for the Panthers and got involved, and it was a new program, USA Football, and they were trying to get what they called 13 master trainers across the United States that could come in and teach fitness of equipment and safety issues and concussion awareness, different things that they have really elevated since then. And we have diminished the number of catastrophic and traumatic brain and neck injuries, I think, a little bit with it. And so Peter recommended me. I went up there, and for 3 years I worked very diligent with USA Football. My mother became ill, and I had to take a sabbatical away, and she passed away, and so I've also got 4 grandchildren. So my wife Pat and I, we've been together 42 years. We're trying to help our children with our grandchildren, and we're doing a little of that. But I always love coming to the clinic because it's the one environment where you see people that have the same morals and the values that you had and want to look after kids and make their program the best it can be. And I love coming up and sharing and spending the day.
Let me ask you a question. I thought about it while you was talking about the Heads Up and the different initiatives with USA Football. Let's go back 1975, 1980, when you were just getting started. How would you have coached different had you known then what you know now with the different techniques that you've learned?
It would be a 180-degree turn, but let me backpedal a little bit. I played at Concord 69, 70, 71, graduated 72, went to South Carolina, played 72 through 75. Everywhere I'd ever played, I was told, take the face mask of your helmet and drive it through the numbers of the chest and take that person to the goalpost, pin them on the goalpost. So I was taught, use the helmet. And it wasn't so much the word weapon as it was use your helmet. It is a battering ram. The most wonderful thing happened. 1976, my first year coaching in Florida, the National Federation came up with a new rule, and they instituted the rule that you cannot use the helmet to butt, ram, or spear an opponent, that it could cause injury, even death and paralysis. So I started as a young offensive line coach at Baker County High School in Florida under Chuck Reedy, who coached at Clemson, was the head coach at Baylor, South Carolina, and became Goose Creek's head coach and state champion, someone I really respect. He would send me to Florida and Florida State, and we would learn how to block. I had to learn how to teach blocking a total different way. Well, then in the mid-90s, I came up here to the clinic, and I was talking with Charlie and Dick and the guys of the High School Athletic Association. I said, we got to get hands involved, like defensive players. So Dick went before the National Federation, and North Carolina is one of the few schools, and it wasn't an initiative by me, it was by the coaches. And we were talking about, if you use your hands, the face mask is not the first point of contact. Now with defensive players, we had to work. I think I would have taught it totally different, because my wife begged me to never get back in coaching because we never had a traumatic or a fatal brain, neck, or paralysis injury over the 33 years I was coaching. I think one other issue is this: goal line situations, those are tough. It's hard to teach hands and feet when the offensive line is down there grunting and the defensive line's grunting, and you got a 250-pound fullback that's trying to get in the end zone, and the linebacker's trying to slide to the side, front of the shoulder, top of the shoulder, drive through, you know. So there are some times, and I said this, I learned this through USA Football, the helmet is worn as a protective device, Chris. It's not used as an instrument that initiates contact, but we wear a helmet for a reason, for protection. So there is going to be some contact with the helmet. If you're a running back, you're running at me, and I'm zeroing in, and I'm gonna make the tackle, and I'm here, and you cut back, and yeah, my head may get in there, but I'm not zeroing in.
Right.
So I would coach differently. I would coach with the same enthusiasm, excitement, but I think with the awareness with our trainers and with strength training, I don't think players are any bigger, faster, stronger, and meaner than Dick Butkus, or, you know, great runners like Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, Jim Brown, Jim Taylor for the Packers. But I think because of the strength programs, the force is just so much different. So physically, you got to be prepared for that.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm gonna change gears.
Okay.
We were having some discussions. We've got a Facebook page that's just nothing but coaches, and we've been having discussions. Best player you've ever seen, best coach you've ever coached against. A couple quick questions. I know you're busy. Everybody wants to talk to you, but it's all good. Best player you've ever coached against.
Best player I've ever coached against. You know, people are going to think I'm crazy because I only got to see him for 3 quarters, but I think the best football player I ever coached against was Ethan Horton. Ethan Horton played in 1980, first year I was at Concord High School. He's quarterback at A.L. Brown. Ethan, 6'4", about 220, and he played for Coach Boswell, and Coach Bob Boswell, who is one of the greatest coaches and one of my mentors. Believe it or not, from Kannapolis, I'll say it, I love Bob. But Ethan ran the wishbone offense, and it wasn't an option offense. It was a power offense. And if you wanted to see Ethan pass, you had to come to pregame warm-ups. But I saw him from this hash throwing out a 10-yard out, 50 yards across the field on a rope. So he could have been today, he could have been Cam Newton. You know, he could have been Dak Prescott. He was a great college player, and he was a great NFL player. So if I had to say the best football player that I ever coached against, I was just thankful when they got up 41-0, he took him out, and he didn't let him go after me.
You know, speaking of Ethan, I was listening to an ESPN radio deal, and they were talking about the evolution of how the tight end today is out in the split. And the announcer, and I can't remember who it was, but he went back to Ethan Horton, and he said, you go back to 1985 when he was drafted by Kansas City and then eventually went to LA and became an all-pro tight end, said that he was well above his time. He said he would have fit in perfectly in today's schemes.
Hey, and you know, today's tight end is almost like the H-back position. You have to be so versatile. You got to be able. I was watching the 10 greatest tight ends ever, and they were talking about one of the top 3 was Kellen Winslow, and they said he wasn't a great blocker. Why did they ever have him block? He was one of the first H-back tight ends. You need to nasty split him and run drags and post and corner routes and hit him and let him score. Yeah. So, you know, the old tight end like John Mackey, you know, 6'3", 6'4", 275, you know, those guys were blockers because everybody was running the ball and they caught basic routes. Today, Gronkowski, Tony Gonzalez, who's just retired. Those guys, they were so athletic. They could have been fullbacks, halfbacks. They could have been anything. And Ethan, and Ethan and I are really good friends. We've been on some programs together. Ethan's mom, I visited her. She was in the same facility my mom is. I've had conversation with her. I love Ethan. I could name the Kannapolis, the Forest Hills, the Central Cabarruses, the North, all the schools I played against, but he's the first name that pops to me every time somebody asks that question.
Best coach you've ever went against?
I look at Bob Boswell as a coach that made me become a better coach, and I say that. I mean, Kannapolis had Bob, then Bruce, then Ron Massey, and then, of course, now Mike Newsom. They've had a great run of coaches. Down at Forest Hills, Johnny Lowry, Johnny. I mean, there are guys that I could mention all across state, but I think I really focused there because of the years I had against Kannapolis. But I want to tell a Bob Boswell story. So when I was hired in 1980, I said to Dr. Bill Irvin, who has the best program in the state? I want to kind of model our program after. He said, A.L. Brown, football, Bob Boswell. And I started laughing because when I was in high school, basically until my senior year, Kannapolis was like a homecoming game.
Sure.
I knew Coach Boswell when he coached at NC State and I played at South Carolina. I knew his reputation. I knew when I did some studying, he had been at High Point Andrews, won the state championship.
And Graham.
And I was amazed. So I picked a day and I called Bob and I said, Coach, may I come up and visit with you? I came up and he said, Easy, here's what you need to do. He said, I have a year-round weight training program. Our football players multi-sports, but if they're not playing, they're in the weight room. So I knew I had to get the weight room right. Second thing, every Friday we wear travel shirts and slacks. It says the big K with A.L. Brown football or Wonder football or Kannapolis football. He said we all dress the same. We eat steak, baked potato, green beans, Grecian roll, drink this. We eat first class. We ride a first class bus. And he ran a first class program. I tell people, and I've said it at my retirement, I say it anywhere, Bob Boswell forced me to become a football coach that maybe I became, and that I started, when somebody said Kannapolis, I wanted to say Concord. Or if they said Concord, right behind it was Kannapolis. So I give Bob Boswell, from 1980 through 1988, those 9 years that we played against each other, I give him all the credit for giving me I modeled our whole thing. And to tell you one last thing, our defense, we called it K-Town right and K-Town left because it was Coach Boswell's Shade 50 that he ran under Earl Edwards at NC State. It's a Shade 50 gap control defense that I ran for 29 years at Concord High School. And I think most people would say we were pretty good defensively. So it was K-Town right and K-Town left.
We became really good at South Rowan running
Sure.
that exact
same defense.
50.
That's right.
The exact same thing. And at that time, to be a young 25-year-old guy sitting in a coach's office, watching him break it down, and we got really good really fast because of him. You made a good analogy one time about the difference between Boswell, Hardin, and Massey, and I'm going to let you tell it in your terms. Basically, it's like using snakes.
It's tongue-in-cheek, but it's with loving grace. I loved all three of them. My ego's good enough. I'll hug them. I love them. They are still to this day, except for Ron. They're all good friends, and with Sherry and Zach, Ron's wife and child, I'm still in connection. So they were writing a book, and they asked me to compare the three coaches. And just right out of the top of my head, I said, well, please accept this analogy with love. Bob Boswell was like a rattlesnake. When you see a rattlesnake on TV, or if you've ever seen one in real life, they look mean right off the bat. And Bob does not have that smiling, lovey-dovey, good guy. I mean, he does now because he's a grandfather and he had two grandchildren play at Concord, so he's learned to love a little bit better. But Bob looked like a rattlesnake. And when Bob struck you, it was immediate sickness and death in football. So the guy looked at me and he said, well, how about Coach Horton? And I said, Coach Horton's like a cobra. You know, the cobra will sit there and it'll mesmerize you, and you look at him and you think, well, he's not really deadly. He's not going to get you. But eventually in the long run, he will get you. Face up, sideways, from behind. You know, he's going to attack you, and when he does, it's with the same deadly instance. Defeat is imminent. Ron Massey reminded me of a water moccasin. Ron would kind of just go around. Ron was quiet and reserved. He wasn't out there. Bob and I were out a little bit. Bruce was a little bit laid back. Ron was real reserved, but when you'd get him one-on-one, you loved him.
Loved him.
But Ron, if you've ever studied water moccasins, they clamp down on you. They don't let go, and they chew, chew, chew. And that was Ron. Ron would get you down the field. And the writer said, well, easy, what are you? Are you the copperhead? I said, oh, no, I'm the python or boa constrictor. I'm just going to put my arms around you, and I'm going to love you to death and squeeze you. So I threw myself in as a reptile, too. But I thought it was a great analogy. What do you think? You knew all of us.
I agree. And just to mention Ron Massey, I mean, God rest his soul. Very misunderstood by a lot of people. I know a lot of Kannapolis fans that really didn't fall in love with him because, you know, Bruce had that charisma. Sure. And just and Ron was different. But once you got to know him, I mean, the most loving guy and tremendous AD. I mean, the gains he made as an AD was incredible.
I'll tell you how much I love Ron Massey, and I may tear up. I stood 6 hours. I stood 6 hours at Whitley's funeral home to pay my respects to Sherry and Zach. Now, let me tell you something. I hadn't stood an hour in line for most anybody outside of my family. I love Ron Massey. Ron Massey and I, before the Concord Kannapolis games, a lot of times would sit on the back steps of Bullock Gym, and he would say to me, easy, how have you coached in 20, 25 of these? And I said, Ron, it's my life. I bleed it. And he said, how do you get through the week? And he would ask my advice, you know, and I was so honored that he would trust me. But Bruce offered me a job at Providence Day, and we almost made that connection. I tried to hire Bob at Concord when he came back. He decided to run for public office. And Ron Massey, anything Sherry or Zach would call and ask me of today, I would do for them. I love those three guys. They are just outside of my family and my coaches and my school. Those are three guys that I love. I do. Yeah. We were in a brotherhood together.
Yeah, and it's, I agree, and it's been tough here lately. I mean, we've been losing a lot of our coaches far too often.
I just saw where Gary Whitman. I coached against him at Lexington and at High Point.
Last season, one of my dear mentors, Larry Dill. It's a sign that, you know, we're all kind of moving up there in age, but you hate to see that. But fortunately, we've got all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that they touched and lived through the rest of their lives. So, but Coach, I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Awesome.
I love you too,
we
buddy.
love you to death, and we appreciate everything you do.
Now, before you go off, though, I have to do my byline.
All right.
Thank you for covering Concord football, brothers.
You're the best ambassador for football there's been. We appreciate your time.